For years, Nigeria bought cars from other countries. Japan built them, Europe built them, China built them, Nigeria bought them. And after a while, many people accepted the painful idea. We can drive cars, but we can't make them. The country had oil. It had millions of hard-working people. It had big dreams. Yet factories kept shutting down. Industries struggled to survive. And manufacturing seemed impossible. Then one man asked a question that sounded crazy. If Nigerians can sell cars, repair cars, and import cars, why can't we build them? Most people didn't believe it could happen. Some laughed at the idea. Others said he was wasting his time. Because building cars in Nigeria meant fighting power failures, poor roads, expensive loans, foreign competition, and years of doubt. But he refused to quit. Starting as a small trader in the busy town of Nnewi, he chased a dream that almost nobody thought could work. A dream to build cars in Nigeria, not import them, build them. And against the odds, that dream became one of Africa's most ambitious manufacturing stories. His name was Innocent Chukwuma. And this is the story of the trader who tried to prove that Nigerians could build modern vehicles. He tried to build belief. To understand Innocent Chukwuma's story, we first have to understand Nnewi. Nnewi is a town in southeastern Nigeria known for one thing: business. For generations, people there lived to survive through trading, hard work, and determination. That was the world Innocent Chukwuma was born into in 1961. Nigeria had just gained independence, and many people believed the future would be bright. But those hopes were soon tested. A few years later, Nigeria's civil war devastated eastern Nigeria. Families lost homes. Businesses collapsed. Many people struggled simply to survive. In places like Nnewi, people learned an important lesson. No one was coming to rescue them. If they wanted a better life, they had to build it themselves. After the war, the town came alive with trade. Markets grew larger. Workshops appeared everywhere. People bought and sold motorcycle parts, bicycle parts, electronics, and tools. Business wasn't just a way to make money. It was a way of life. Young boys watched traders negotiate deals. They learned how to spot opportunities. They learned how to work hard and move fast. Innocent was one of those boys. He grew up in a modest family with strong values and limited resources. There was no wealthy background, no powerful connections, no family factory waiting for him. Like many young people of his generation, he faced financial challenges and eventually left school. For some, that would have ended the dream. For Innocent, it became the beginning. The streets of Nnewi became his classroom. The market became his teacher. As a teenager, he started selling motorcycle spare parts and mechanical components. The business was small, but he paid attention to everything. He watched what customers bought. He watched what traders imported. He watched where the money flowed. And one thing stood out. Almost everything Nigerian used came from somewhere else. The spare parts were imported. The machines were imported. The vehicles were imported. Nigeria was buying products from the world, but making very little for itself. Most people accepted that reality. Innocent did not. A question had started forming in his mind. It was a simple question, but one day it would change his life. If Nigerians could repair vehicles, sell vehicles, and import vehicles, why couldn't they build them? As Innocent Chukwuma was growing his business, Nigeria was changing too. On paper, the country had everything it needed to become an industrial giant. It had oil, it had natural resources, it had millions of hard-working people. And during the oil boom of the 1970s, money flowed into the country like never before. For a moment, the future looked bright. Factories opened, new industries appeared, car assembly plants were built, global companies such as Peugeot and Volkswagen set up operations in Nigeria. Many believed the country was finally becoming an industrial nation. But beneath that excitement, a problem was growing. Nigeria was becoming addicted to imports. Instead of making things locally, it became easier to buy them from other countries. Cars were imported, machines were imported, even many basic industrial materials came from overseas. Why build it yourself when you could simply buy it? Slowly, the country began consuming more and producing less. Then things got worse. Factories struggled with poor electricity. Roads and ports became unreliable. Government policies changed constantly. Businesses found it difficult to plan for the future. Economic crisis in the 1980s and 1990s pushed many industries even closer to collapse. Factory workers lost jobs. Manufacturing slowed down. Imported goods flooded the market. By the end of the century, many Nigerians have accepted a painful reality. Nigeria bought almost everything, but built very little. Nowhere was this more obvious than on the roads. The cars were foreign, the buses were foreign, the trucks were foreign. Millions of Nigerians depended on vehicles made somewhere else. The country had become one of Africa's biggest markets for imported vehicles. Yet, almost none of those vehicles were made in Nigeria. Most business people saw no reason to change that. Importing was easier, safer, and often more profitable. Why build a factory when you could simply import finished products? Why fight power shortages, rising costs, and government bureaucracy? For most people, the answer was simple. You wouldn't. But the deeper Innocent Chukwuma moved into the spare part business, the more he noticed something others ignored. Every shipment arriving at the port carried products Nigeria depended on. And every shipment meant more money leaving the country. The question that had started in Nnewi kept growing louder in his mind. What if Nigeria could build its own vehicles? Not just sell them, not just repair them, build them. To most people, the idea sounded impossible. But sometimes, the biggest changes begin with a question everyone else is afraid to ask. By now, Innocent Chukwuma was no longer a small trader. His business was growing. What started with motorcycle spare parts had become a successful company serving Nigeria's transport industry. Motorcycles were everywhere. They carried workers to jobs, students to school, goods to markets, and behind every motorcycle was a huge demand for spare parts. Innocent understood that business better than most. He knew what customers needed, he knew what mechanics wanted, and he knew where the products came from. Almost all of them were imported. As his business expanded, he began traveling abroad, especially to Asia. There, he saw something that changed the way he thought. He saw factories, huge factories, places where thousands of workers turned raw materials into finished products every day. They weren't importing wealth, they were creating it. For Innocent, that was a powerful lesson. Countries become stronger when they make things, not when they only buy them. The more factories he visited, the more one idea stayed in his mind. If other countries could build industries from scratch, why couldn't Nigeria? Most people weren't asking that question. Importing was already making money. Building factories was risky. It required huge investment, reliable electricity, skilled workers, and patience. Lots of patience. For many business people, manufacturing simply wasn't worth the trouble. But Innocent saw things differently. The deeper he looked, the more he realized something important. Trading could create wealth for one person. Manufacturing could create opportunities for thousands. It creates jobs, develops skills, and keep more money inside the country. For years, Nigeria had been buying products made by others. What if Nigerians started making some of those products themselves? The idea refused to leave him. At first, he moved slowly. He expanded beyond trading and into local assembly. Then he began thinking bigger, much bigger. Not just motorcycles, vehicles, buses, trucks, cars. The dream sounded impossible. Many people believed Nigeria lacked the systems needed to build vehicles. Others believed Nigeria would never trust a local brand. Some thought he was aiming too high. But Innocent Chukwuma kept moving forward. Because this was no longer just a business opportunity. It had become a mission. A mission to prove that Nigerians could build, not just buy. And soon, that mission would lead him to take the biggest risk of his life. He was about to stop importing vehicles and start building them. Dreaming is one thing, building is another. For years, Innocent Chukwuma had believed Nigeria could make its own vehicles. Now it was time to prove it. In 2007, he founded Innoson Vehicle Manufacturing in Nnewi, Anambra State. The goal was simple: build vehicles in Nigeria. Not just sell them, not just import them, build them. It was a bold move. Many people thought it would fail. After all, car manufacturing is one of the toughest businesses in the world. It requires money, technology, skilled workers, reliable supply chains. And Nigeria was still struggling with poor electricity, weak infrastructure, and rising business costs. To many observers, the idea made no sense. Why build cars in Nigeria when it was easier to import them? But Chukwuma pushed ahead. Slowly, the factory began to take shape. Workers were hired, machines were installed, training programs were created. What had once been an idea was becoming reality. Soon, vehicles started rolling out of the factory. Buses, trucks, utility vehicles, and later, passenger cars. For the first time, many Nigerians were seeing vehicles carrying a local brand name. That alone was enough to grab attention. Some people were excited. Others were skeptical. Could a Nigerian vehicle really compete with foreign brands? Would customers trust it? Could the company survive? The questions never stopped. But neither did the factory. As production continued, Innoson became more visible across the country. Government agencies bought some of its vehicles. State governments added Innoson buses to transportation programs. More Nigerians began hearing the company's name. And with every vehicle produced, the company challenged a belief that had existed for decades. The belief that serious manufacturing could not happen in Nigeria. Inside the factory, something else was happening too. Workers were gaining skills. Technicians were learning new trades. Engineers were gaining experience. Jobs were being created. Because manufacturing is about modern products. It is about people. Every worker trained today can help build even bigger industries tomorrow. That is how industrial nations grow. The road was never easy. Production costs remained high. Power shortages continued. Imported components became more expensive whenever the naira weakened. Competition from foreign vehicles remained intense. Yet, Innoson survived. And in many ways, that was part of the achievement. Because in a country where many factories had closed their doors, this one kept moving forward. By now, Innocent Chukwuma had become one of Nigeria's most recognized industrial entrepreneurs. Some called him a visionary. Others called him a dreamer. But no one could ignore what stood in Nnewi. The vehicle factory, built by Nigerians, run by Nigerians, producing vehicles for Nigerians. And whether people loved it or doubted it, one thing was now clear. The impossible had become real. Building a factory was only the beginning. Keeping it alive was much harder. As Innoson Vehicle Manufacturing grew, so did attention around it. And not all of it was positive. Many Nigerians still found it hard to believe that a local company could build vehicles at a serious level. Some people supported the idea. They were proud to see a Nigerian brand on buses and trucks. But others were skeptical. They asked hard questions. Are these vehicles fully made in Nigeria? Or are they just assembled from imported parts? Could they really compete with Toyota, Honda, or Mercedes? These doubts never fully went away. At the same time, the company faced real business problems. Nigeria's economy made manufacturing extremely difficult. Electricity was unstable, so factories often relied on generators. That increased production costs. Importing parts became expensive whenever the value of the naira dropped. Transporting goods across the country was also costly and unpredictable. Every stage of production carried risk. In many countries, factories work inside stable systems. But in Nigeria, companies often had to build those systems themselves. That meant higher costs, more stress, and slower growth. But the pressure did not stop there. Innoson also faced serious business and legal disputes, including a long-running conflict with a major commercial bank. The disagreement involved loans and financial transactions connected to the company's operations. The case went through the courts and became widely discussed in the media. Opinion became divided. Some people saw the dispute as proof of how difficult it is for local manufacturers to survive in Nigeria's financial system. Others saw it as part of the normal risk of running large businesses. Either way, it added tension around the company and its founder. While all of this was happening, competition in the market remained strong. Foreign vehicles were still more trusted by many buyers. Used imported cars were often cheaper, and they already had a long history in Nigeria. That made it hard for a local brand to grow quickly. Even with production continuing, Innoson had to fight for acceptance, not just in the market, but in people's minds. Despite all these challenges, the company did not shut down. Factories continued working. Vehicles continued to leave production lines. Workers continued showing up every day. And slowly, something important became clear. The biggest obstacle was not only money or infrastructure, it was belief. Many people still believed that large-scale manufacturing could not succeed in Nigeria. That idea was deeply rooted and hard to change. But Innoson, whether fully accepted or not, was already challenging that belief. Every bus that rolled out of the factory carried more than passengers. It carried a question. What if this is only the beginning? By now, the factory in Nnewi was real. Machines were running. Workers were showing up every day. And vehicles were still coming out of the production line. But the bigger question was no longer about one company. It was about a whole continent. For decades, Africa had depended on the rest of the world for finished goods. Cars were imported, machines were imported, technology was imported. Raw materials left Africa, and finished products returned at higher prices. This cycle had become normal, almost invisible. But stories like Innoson began to change it. Not because everything was perfect, and not because all problems were solved, but because something had started. A local factory, a local brand, a local attempt to build what many believed could only come from outside Africa. Inside Nigeria, the reality was still difficult. Electricity was unstable. Costs were high. Infrastructure was weak. Imported vehicles were still cheaper and often more trusted. And industries like Innoson still had to fight every day just to survive. But survival itself told a story. Because in a place where many factories never made it, this one continued. And that alone changed what people believed was possible. The lesson from Innoson was not that everything is easy. It is that starting matters, building matters, trying matters, because no country becomes industrial overnight. It begins with people who refuse to accept that nothing can be built. It begins with people who choose production over dependency. And it grows slowly through experience, mistakes, and persistence. Innoson did not solve all of Nigeria's industrial problems, but it proved something important, that local ambition can exist in difficult places, that manufacturing can begin even when conditions are not perfect, and that belief itself is part of economic development. In the end, the story is not only about cars. It is about courage. It is about risk. And it is about a simple idea that carried one trader from Nnewi into history. That Africans should not only buy the future, they should build it. And maybe the final lesson is this: progress does not start when everything is ready. It starts when someone decides to begin anyway. If this story gave you a new perspective on African industrial ambition, consider subscribing for more documentaries like this. Because the next story might change the way you see the world too.